Welcome back to our live and continuing broadcast from our studios here in Times Square in New York, where we are reaching a critical part of our coverage. The focus will be in some time, of course, on what the Pakistan Prime Minister says. But besides the squabble between India and Pakistan, increasingly over the next few hours, we'll see the focus shift on the bilateral, the several bilaterals which Narendra Modi will have here in New York. And one of the key people who is scheduled to meet is with me here in the studio. He's one of the Senator Robert Menendez, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Let me stretch out and shake your hand, Senator. Thank you for coming in and driving all the way to our studios today. Senator Menendez is one of the most influential names in American foreign policy as of now, also one of the most respected. And he's also known to be extremely vocal on issues that concern India. So, Senator Menendez, you haven't had your meeting yet with Mr. Modi. You're scheduled to meet him over the weekend, I think.
Yes, I am. Yes.
So, when you meet him, what are some of the key issues which you'd pick up with him?
Well, first of all, we're looking forward to a great visit by the Prime Minister, both here at the UN in New York and in Washington. I think there is a hope and expectation of a new, stronger, flourishing relationship between the United States and India based on so many shared values as well as shared interests. Certainly economic interests. There's a great potential for a thriving, growing economy inside of India that can also thrive and grow in the United States in terms of our bilateral investments. There is the issue of counterterrorism, something that is in our mutual interests. There is the interest of how do we create greater open markets in India for that investment that I think the Prime Minister is seeking to create greater opportunities. At the same time, how do we have an India that has a more liberalized process in terms of intellectual property rights? So those are some of the key issues. It's about economics, security, and growing a relationship that can benefit our two people.
Senator, before I take this discussion forward, would you agree that from the time of 2008, when India and the United States signed the Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement, relations went into some kind of a, I wouldn't say downhill, but they plateaued. They went into a kind of deep freeze, and there were issues of trust as well. I mean, there were all those questions of revelations of snooping by the NSA on Indian embassies, and we were revealed that we are the 5th most snooped country in the United States. Do you feel there is a trust deficit that both Narendra Modi and Obama need to overcome in this regard before moving forward?
Well, look, as someone who was a strong advocate of that nuclear cooperation, it was a high watermark.
Yes, it was.
Unfortunately, because of a series of bureaucratic difficulties inside of India, it didn't really get fulfilled in a way that energy could flow to the people inside of India, and that U.S. companies who have the expertise to do that would have an opportunity to make that happen. But that was only one element. The engagement for India to be a more significant regional security partner didn't get materialized.
Yes.
The opportunity for the investments that could take place that would unlock economic potential both here in the United States as well as in India didn't get realized. So I think that the way I would describe it, it was a series of lost opportunities, that there was expectations that went unfulfilled. But now I think that there is hopefully a new beginning. Everything I have read that Prime Minister Modi has said indicates a new day dawns in India, and we hope that new day is also a new day of opportunity, create even a stronger relationship between two great democracies.
I hope it happens, and a lot of people would hope it happens, but one of the principal pinpricks in that relationship, Senator Menendez, has been Pakistan. And I was reading an interview that you gave back in 2011, and you said that Pakistan is, in your words, a limited partner in the war on terror. You said, Senator, that Pakistan has a lot of explaining to do about the presence of Osama bin Laden on its country. So let me ask you directly, sir, since, why does America repose so much faith, despite all that has happened on Pakistan, despite its notorious history?
Well, look, Pakistan is also a large country in the region. It is a country that can play a positive security role. At times it has played that, but it has not fulfilled its responsibility fully. It is my view that certainly before this present administration in Pakistan, that there obviously it was very difficult to understand how Osama bin Laden, a high-value target, the leader of Al-Qaeda, could be residing in Pakistan in the midst of what is in essence the War College University of Pakistan's
within a
area,
kilometer of that, yes.
and somehow nobody would know it's happening. So, but then again, our relationships are about looking towards the future, and so we will judge Pakistan under its new prime minister as to how it moves forward. How does it fight in the Fatah region? How does it work to meet the challenge of counterterrorism? How does it share information with us? How does it act? And in all of these relationships, we aspire to the best, but we will judge relationships based upon actions that are taken, not just simply words that are said.
That's very well put, Senator. Just as a quick follow-up of that, would you say that it is time for Pakistan to also investigate more strongly and not just deny the possible presence of Ayman al-Zawahiri and Mullah Omar of the Al-Qaeda and the Taliban on its soil? Because there have been several intelligence reports that they are in and around the Quetta region. This is a very important issue for India, Senator Menendez, because of the recent video of Ayman al-Zawahiri where he talks about a stronger push into India. Many people in India are concerned. What would your views be on that, Senator?
Well, to the extent that any country has information about these two individuals, they obviously are of great interest not just to the United States, but all who are concerned about the issue of terrorism. And this is an opportunity, yes, to the extent that there might be information as it relates to those two individuals being in the Afghan-Pakistan border. But it is one of the things that we are also looking, as we talk to the Prime Minister about, how do we engage in a more cooperative counterterrorism effort? When Al-Qaeda talks about trying to create a foothold in India, it is in India's interest to engage. I believe India as a very significant regional leader should be engaged with us, for example, on ISIL. It may not be the challenge of the moment to India, but it will continuously grow to be a challenge. How do we engage them in that regard? India and the United States have the largest number of military exercises together of any other country in the world. It's pretty interesting. I don't think most people understand that. We need to turn that reality into the ability for coordinated action in the mutual interest of our respective countries. We are concerned about Lashkar al-Taiba. I'm sure India, is as well. So how we deal with these issues is part of a opportunity to move forward in collective security interests, in having India play a rightful role as a leader, particularly in that part of the world, and in cooperation with the United States.
What specifically is the next level of a strategic relationship that you are looking at, sir, or that America constantly speaks of? Can you be a little bit more specific on what kind of a collaboration?
I think we would like to see the Indian government move to action, to its using some of its resources in counterterrorism efforts. We would like to have a greater sharing of intelligence as it relates to counterterrorism efforts. We would like India to ultimately take a strong role in the fight against terrorism. And we believe that is in India's national security interests, as well as other countries in the region and in the world. India has invested over $1 billion in Afghanistan's future as a neighbor that it is concerned about. For Afghanistan to thrive, two things are going to happen. We're going to have to be able to continue to fight terrorism, and we're going to have to open up, for example, a new Silk Road initiative. India can play an incredible role in each of those
So would, for example, Senator Menendez, would you like to see, because the problem about the Indian presence in Afghanistan has been the insecurity of Pakistan. I mean, bring up Pakistan again and again. And as we take this conversation forward, I'm sure, what I reflect upon is the fact that the biggest stumbling block in this relationship is Pakistan. Senator Menendez, on Afghanistan, would you, for example, would America like to see more feet on the ground militarily for India to have? Would it welcome a stronger military presence once America withdraws by 2016 in Afghanistan?
Well, first of all, that's for the Afghanistan government to decide themselves. They have to solicit, if they think that that is in their national interest and national security, they would have to solicit the help from India. And certainly to the extent that we have democratic countries assisting the Afghans in terms of helping to develop their security forces so that they can fight for their own freedom and security, I think that would always be welcome. But that's for the Afghan government to decide. But I have a different view than your question posits. I do not view that our relationship with India is linchpinned upon Pakistan. Our relationship with India is linchpinned between two great democracies economically and in security and in growing an opportunity to bring millions out of poverty and into greater prosperity, which unlocks potential not just for India but for the world.
I'd like to go to that part, the economic part, in just a bit. Just quick one question on that, on the line that we were on, Senator Menendez. What if India were to seek a reassurance or at least an understanding from America? You see, Senator Menendez, our view, and pardon my being very frank with you on this, has been that America seeks cooperation on its terms for its own interest, whereas India would want to certainly cooperate with America, but also towards defending its own interests. And terrorism has really taken many lives in India, and almost all of it emanates out of Pakistan. If we build a stronger relationship with America, will America work with India potentially to go at the root cause of where the terrorism is striking from?
I think the answer, first of all, you say the United States wishes to create a relationship under its own interests. And I would say to you, India seeks to create a relationship under its own interests. That is the nature of nations. The question is how one harmonizes the interests of two countries to ultimately find the mutuality that can exist. And I think that is possible. Look, I believe the United States will stand for going towards the root causes of terrorism wherever it exists and in whatever circumstances it ultimately rears its ugly head.
Senator, now, we're seeing pictures there of Narendra Modi's arrival for the conversation that he's going to have here, as well as in Washington. On the entire economic side, Mr. Modi wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, which was published this morning. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it. Yeah. But he talked about removing the bureaucratic hurdles, about hastening the process, about making the process of investments more transparent. Specifically, are there any issues that remain for the Americans which they would want a firm and specific assurance from on India before increasing the level of economic cooperation and investment?
Well, look, I think that there is a view that there's a great potential inside of India for American investment. Vice President Biden has talked about creating a trade relationship that would move to $500 billion. That's a very significant investment. But of course, investors will always look at several things. Is there a sufficient rule of law and transparency in the operations of governmental entities? Is there a respect for intellectual property rights? For example, I come from New Jersey, which is the medicine cabinet of the world. Our great pharmaceutical companies produce life-saving, life-enhancing drugs. Will they be able to go and make investments in India in which their intellectual property will be observed? In technology, in which India itself is increasingly growing, it's going to have an interest in making sure that its intellectual property rights are observed globally as it produces and exports. So I appreciate that. I have read that I think it's the Minister of Commerce has announced that there will be there is a 6-month engagement towards developing a progressive and transparent effort on intellectual property rights. I hope that that produces a solid result. That can unlock many doors. A bilateral trade investment agreement to re-engage that. And then certainly bringing India into some of the international trade agreements is very important as well, both for India and for the United States. So these are all what I would call positive challenges to address that can unlock tremendous potential.
One bone of contention, and this is something that you have been discussing with your Indian counterparts, is immigration reform. Senator, there are provisions in the comprehensive immigration reform bill that Indians have expressed some serious concern over with respect to the visa regime and the ease of doing business in the United States. Can the U.S. really strengthen the economy in tandem with India if America continues to place visa and outsourcing restrictions under the guise of progressive immigration reforms?
Well, let me just say that speaking personally, as one of those who helped create the comprehensive immigration reform that passed the Senate and unfortunately has been languishing in the House, I'm of the view that human capital and intellect, I hope that I can get it here in America, but when I can, I certainly want to be able to get it the best and the brightest anywhere in the world. And India has often been a source of that human capital. There are provisions in the same bill that you're referring to that would be fantastic for Indian citizens. For example, many of Indians are studying in the United States. Well, if they're in the STEM field, science, technology, and mathematics, they'd get probably an automatic visa if they wanted to come work in the United States. That is something that doesn't exist today. They'd in essence get a green card with their diploma. That's a fantastic opportunity for Indians. So we're going to continue to perfect this.
Because I know that you have backed the comprehensive immigration reform bill.
Right.
You put your political backing to it. But is it open to discussion? I mean, this is
yes, I think
is it open to discussion with the
I think it is. Of course, whenever you come to a compromise bill, which is the essence of democracy, it doesn't happen enough sometimes these days in Washington. Whenever you come
it does not happen more often in New Delhi, I can assure you.
Well, the bottom line is that this was a moment of compromise.
Yes.
For some of my Republican colleagues, this was an issue that they had, and we tried to create a sufficient enough openness so that we can, in fact, still achieve the human capital that India can often offer, and at the same time, hopefully keep it as a question that is open for future consideration as we move forward on the reform. But for many, many citizens of India, other elements of that reform will be incredibly important for their opportunity here in the United States.
One area where we would like to see reform, and this is my most critical and final question to you. Senator, Obama visited India in 2010 amidst great fanfare. And, the view in India many people have, and I also have, is that somewhere it went downhill after that. It could have to do with politics in India, politics here, priorities change. But when Obama was there, on the floor of the Indian Parliament, he spoke about India deserving its place as a permanent member of the UN Security Council. But however, after that, the pace of reform has been slow. It's not changed much in the last 4 years. Senator, don't you feel that the United States as a permanent member itself, as part of a building strategic alliance with India, should not expect India to follow its line every time at the UN and then say, if it follows a different line, that we are not going to push for you in the UN Security Council, but instead look at the UN Security Council, where a reformed council with a member like India can do much more to achieve the balance of power at the global level?
Well, look, the pace of reform at the United Nations as a whole has been glacial it takes forever to create reform. So there's a broad reform package that many of us who support the United Nations also believe needs to take place. For example, you have a Human Rights Council that has some of the greatest violators of human rights in the world on it. It's pretty ridiculous. There's also the need to reform some of the opaque system at the United Nations and the costs of the United Nations, which is disproportionately borne by the United States, which we do with pride, but there needs to be. But at the end of the day, I think, as the President said, there is a welcoming attitude towards India being on the Security Council. But by the same token, India, that has been part of the non-aligned movement, needs to think as itself in a more global context. That means with the opportunity for a Security Council seat comes responsibilities. What role are you going to play as it relates to counterterrorism?
Is there a trust deficit on that?
What role are you going to play in the spread of Ebola? What role are you going to play in the international order of finances? Then it has the full potential to be embraced not just by the United States, which embraces it, but by others. So it's not a question of a trust deficit. It's a question of an evolution inside of India to come to the view globally that, yes, we do not seek to intercede in the affairs of other nations, but if those nations violate the international order, we understand our global responsibility to respond to that. That is a question of evolution that I believe will take place inside of India.
Well, I think it's a very interesting time being here in New York myself. I get a feeling that America is looking very closely at the Indian government. And let's see how things play out in Washington over the weekend.
We expect
Senator,
the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for coming into our studios. Enjoyed this conversation. And